What's your true life story that nobody will believe? Serious. Story 1. My biological father is a drug dealer, specifically cocaine. My mother was a client of his and started sleeping with him in exchange for drugs. She got pregnant and tried to have an abortion, but it failed. That's where I came into the picture. My father decided that he should rape me repeatedly from around ages 4 to 6. He then got the great idea to sell me to other men to be in a child prostitution and pornography ring. I was videoed being raped and tortured, and those videos were sold. I was never sent to kindergarten. Child Protective Services realized something was horribly wrong when I was 7, and I was sent to live with my grandparents. In the process of the transfer from my mom to extended family, I was kidnapped. I was taken across the country and hidden in an attic for about a week before I was found. My uncle hired a private detective who was able to track me down and find me. There were multiple Amber Alerts sent out for me as well. My extended family did not even know I existed until CPS and the police contacted them. When I was finally found, they realized that at age 7, I weighed 38 pounds and was significantly malnourished. I had some severe developmental delays, like not being able to read or tie my shoes. I had actually never used silverware before and did not know what a fork was. I was essentially a child that never existed until then. There was quite the lengthy court battle that followed, and I was sent to live with my grandparents, who I had never seen before in my life. Things improved from there, and I lived with them until I was 15. Now, I live with my uncle and his husband, and they have legally adopted me at age 18. Now, I am a healthy, happy teenager who is a pre-med major and a vet tech. I wasn't supposed to make it, but I did. No one believes how crazy my life was because of how normal I am now. Edit forgot to mention that my mom was doing meth, cocaine, heavily drinking, and smoking while pregnant with me. It's great to not be mentally damaged from that. Edit 2. OMG Reddit Gold Holy. This is awesome. Edit 3. Since I have been received hate mail claiming that I am lying, I am making an imager album of my life, for all of you to see. I am not home at the moment, so please be patient. I have been at work, mentioned this before on this sub, but my life is akin to a bad pun at times. I was carrying my skis, slipped on some ice and fell down. I asked a passing girl if she could lend me a hand with the skis while I got up. She then told me she had no arms, and proceeded to wave her empty coat sleeves around as proof. I just kind of fumbled to get up whilst apologizing profusely. She giggled and walked away. Story 2. I've had numerous wild creatures come up to me at random times. With absolutely zero fear. In college, I was walking through the woods that stretched between my dorm and the football field where I parked my car. There was this clearing that overlooked the field, and the track team was practicing. My roommate was a vaulter, so I stopped to watch for a little bit, and leaned up against a tree. I had an apple in my purse, and eventually I felt this little nudge. A fawn had come up and was nosing my bag. I stood stock still and just let it sniff me, and saw Mama Deer was a few feet away very slowly. I reached into my bag, and baby bounded away. I took the apple and set it on the ground, and walked away really slowly. Later that afternoon I was cutting through the woods again, and the apple was still there, but with bites out of it. I've also been hiking and had squirrels and bunnies come up to me with no issue. Birds will land near me and not fly away. It's pretty awesome, but because it will only happen when I'm alone, I don't tell anyone. It's like my own little secret that I may actually be Snow White. Story 3. My dad was married 2 times before my mom. When he was with his second wife, he would travel a lot for work, which I knew. What I didn't know is that one night he came home to find his wife in bed with another man. Actually walked in on them. He left the room and came back with a gun, shot the man dead, and wounded his wife. He turned himself in immediately and was sent to prison. He was sentenced to 10 years in a maximum security prison. In the last year he was in prison, which was the 4th year, he got out for good behavior. And since the judge ruled it a crime of passion, he met the prison minister. The prison minister was my mom. My dad is a murderer. My mom was the minister. I am the product of a conjugal visit. Story 4. On my way home from school about 7 years ago, I was sitting at a very busy intersection waiting to turn left. It was very gloomy outside. All of a sudden, it sounded and felt like the back of my car exploded. There was also a quick, very bright light that flashed in my rear view mirror. I panicked, and noticed immediately after that the stoplight stopped working, and it also began to rain. I looked out in the distance, and saw lightning strike. I also looked on either side of me where there was a ton of traffic, and everyone was staring at me like this. That's right, I was struck by lightning. Story 5. I met a guy online, fell in love. We were a couple for 5 or so months, began to make plans to meet. Before that could happen, his sister was killed in a car accident. Meeting plans were put on hold. He started to pull away. I went to Baton Rouge with the Red Cross after Hurricane Katrina. While there, I found out I was being catfished. I then revenged another guy I knew from online for a couple days. He turned out to be a top-notch. I went home and called my catfisher. There was no car accident, his sister was alive, and it was basically a panicked attempt to delay meeting. I ended up eventually forgiving him. I flew across the country, met him, and fell in love in person. I moved out there a couple months later. Everything was amazing. We were so happy for a year. Then he moved for his job, and despite his protests I loved where we lived and had a great job. Followed him. 3 weeks later he came to my apartment after work one day. He broke down in tears, and told me he was getting married that weekend in an arranged marriage. 36 hours later I watched him get on a plane and haven't seen him since. Tomorrow is his 7th wedding anniversary. Story 6. Just after I turned 19, I was arrested and charged for an armed robbery I was completely innocent of. I spent 10 months in jail, 6 of which I spent in solitary confinement on suicide watch. I spent my birthday at a resort hotel with my girlfriend at the time. That night at around 3 a.m. the front desk was robbed by 2 people, one with a gun and one with a knife. We were questioned when we left the hotel at 11 a.m., since we roughly matched a height-weight description of the masked robbers. Later that day, it was discovered that my girlfriend had used a bad credit card to pay for the room unbeknownst to me, and we were both publicly arrested on a sidewalk and taken to the state police barracks in handcuffs, without a word on what we were being charged with. We were taken to separate rooms and questioned for hours on end about the robbery. The same questions over and over again. She ended up going to jail for the credit card and I was released but told to return the next day for further questioning. I did, and was taken to a back room, sat in a corner and had 2 detectives relentlessly question me, picking apart everything I was saying, looking for any circumstantial evidence that could connect me to the crime, and suggesting to me that my girlfriend had robbed the place and I was going down with her if I didn't give them information. Being 19, I had no idea what to do and believed what they were telling me. I didn't question the falsified information they presented to me, and I was brought several times to the brink of giving a confession after being threatened with 10 years upstate if I didn't cooperate. 10 days later, 2 officers showed up at my door and arrested me for armed robbery. My girlfriend was coerced into giving a confession implicating me as an accomplice. I was placed immediately into solitary on 24-hour suicide watch, and anxiously waited for a public defender. A week later she showed up and I told her I was totally innocent. She rolled her eyes and said, "Are you kidding me?" I burst into tears, my last hope of release being dashed, and she realized I was telling the truth. She said there's no defense against my girlfriend's confession, and I sank into such a deep depression coupled with shock that I had a psychotic break a few months into my stay. 90 days in solitary at 19 with no hope of proving your innocence will do that. The district attorney made periodic visits to me, offering 2 to 5 year deals for a confession and 10 years if I fought the charges, but I told him I would not admit to something I didn't do. Fast forward to 6 months after my arrest, all spent in solitary. I was woken and driven hurriedly early one morning to the state police barracks, where the DA met with me in a back room and said, "We have determined through further investigation that you were not at the scene of the crime." I was bursting with anger inside and said, "So you'll be releasing me today and dropping all charges, correct?" He got nervous and said, "No, we can't let you go without charges because it would look very bad on us, but I'll tell you what. We'll drop all the charges and give you a charge of interfering with the investigation. You'll be out in less than 6 months." I told him to get my lawyer there. I had a fairly heated exchange, my first real emotions I had felt other than despair in half a year, and agreed. I plead guilty to aiding and abetting the consummation of a crime after the fact and ended up doing 10 months total. A few months after my release, my girlfriend was released and we tried piecing together what happened. Out of nowhere, the mother of the man who planned and committed the robbery found us and told us in person that her son admitted to her that he robbed the place with a close friend of his. He had been fired from the resort 3 days earlier and needed money to support his drug habit. He knew what day would profit most, where the money was, and how to easily get it, as well as how to bypass all form of security. She went to the police and they turned her away, saying they already had the people who did it and they didn't want to hear it. We tried hard to find a lawyer to take our case but were never successful. This DA was later investigated for intimidation and abuse of power in a separate case, and to this day that is my only sense of justice in this situation. Reddit Gold, thank you so much. These comments of support and encouragement mean so much to me. Honestly, I can't tell you enough how grateful I am for your sympathy and kindness. Thank you all so much. Every comment has helped me and some of you have even brought me to tears. Again, thank you. Story 7. I met a guy online. We emailed and messaged. This was before texting was a thing, and went out a few times. I liked him but wasn't sure about it. He called me pretty regularly again. This was pre-texting. One day no calls. That night I called and left him a message. No return call. I called his work the next day, and he hadn't shown up. I called the police, who did a well-person check at his house, but he wasn't there. I wasn't there. The next day the police called me back. They'd found his body, had been murdered by one of his neighbors, and I had to testify at the trial. Story 8. I've posted this before, but here we go again. When we were younger we would play a game where we would throw a pot lid as far as we could into the water and someone would have to fetch it, basically like playing fetch with your dog. The kid who would win was the one who swam the furthest. One day, a kid threw the lid really far but the other kid was determined to get it. He swam out really far and then bam, the crocodile got him and dragged him underwater. Some of you asked for the AMA link, so here you go. Story 9. My aunt has only ever flown from Atlanta airport twice. The first time it was hijacked, taken to Cuba, and then sent back to the States. The second time the landing gear didn't work and they did a crash landing on the belly of the plane. My aunt has never flown through Atlanta since. Story 10. My husband had the opportunity to operate on a gorilla's knee once. They have essentially the same anatomy as humans, so they ask human physicians to operate on them in many major zoos. It was really cool, and afterwards they gave him a painting done by the gorilla as thanks. Apparently the gorilla was going through some adolescent rank wars with other male gorillas and had his knee battered and bitten though the meniscus. I know it's his story, not mine, but he doesn't get on the internet, and I think it's super cool and I'm really proud of him. We had it framed with a thank you note from Belly the gorilla and his trainer. Story 11. Falling in love in Paris with this gorgeous woman, then living with her for 3 weeks in this tiny town in Switzerland. I have pictures and people still don't believe me about the movie quality things we did, romantic things, not dirty things. But a little of that too. Story 12. I have 3 dead exes. One died when he was 25 from a car accident, one when he was 30 from a mysterious illness, and another one was stabbed 40 times by his girlfriend's jealous ex. He was 18. I also lost my virginity to a dude with a glass eye who went to jail for rape. Story 13. When I was 10 years old, I was dared by another kid to trip up the Prime Minister of the UK, who, at the time, was Tony Blair. I did it, dude buckled like a little, saw him 3 years afterwards, and I never made eye contact with him. Other story, got hit by a car twice in one day. Not the same car, thankfully, but it was on the same road, at separate times during that day. Edit him getting asked where did I do this. I can't remember the location exactly, but it was a dinner party that my grandparents were invited to. They know people in the government. Story 14. My mum had always been told she couldn't have children. When her dad died, she went through an emotional time and asked God for some sign that he was in heaven. Suddenly she finds out she's pregnant, and the due date was her dad's birthday. Story 15. I was in Mexico way past my visa allowance, was only allowed 90 days, but was there for about 6 months at the time of this story. I was driving and passed a police car going too fast, so I got pulled over. I should mention I was also illegally working in Mexico at the time as well and had my uniform and stuff in my trunk. As I'm pulled over and doing the whole license registration thing, the cops asked me for my visa. I told them it was at my house, which was not too far away, and if they would allow me to go get it. At this point I just wanted to be alone for a second so I could make some calls and find out what to do. They asked me if they let me get it would it even be valid. Not wanting to lie myself over more, I told them no, it was expired, and asked them what now. They started explaining to me that they would have to take me to jail and then deported. At this point I am talking to one officer while the other is searching my car and finds my uniform. They ask me if I'm working in Mexico as well. At this point they are getting angry and start making vague threats about how I will be getting the same treatment Mexicans get when they are in the US working illegally and get caught. At this point I realized they didn't realize my license was a Canadian license and that I was Canadian. I told them this and instantly the situation completely changed. Now they don't care about the visa and are asking me tons of questions about Canada. Is it cold all year? Do bears wander the streets of Toronto, etc. We talked for quite a while and they seemed really interested in Canada and were really friendly with me when they realized I was an American. So when I calmed down a bit after talking with them, I figured might as well ask again what they want to do about the visa situation. They seemed apologetic and said unfortunately they already called it in, so they have to bring me to the station. As I am ready to start going with them, they hear the radio in their cruiser, so one goes to answer it. He comes running back to my car and tells me to quickly get in my car and follow them down the road and don't even think about trying to get away from them. At this point I have no idea what is going on, but I just do what he says and get in my car and follow them as they start speeding away 160. About 2 minutes down the road, a car bomb had gone off near a restaurant, and injured, maybe killed, I never found out, a bunch of people. We pull up to the smoldering car and the cops get out and tell me to wait in my car. As I wait in my car they go and do their cop thing. After about 20 minutes, one of the officers comes up to my car, hands me my license, tells me to go home and not get caught again and get back to Canada ASAP. I stayed in Mexico another 8 months before I went back. Story 16. When I was 23 I had to spend the night at the DC Reagan Airport. I hadn't gone through security yet, so I was walking the main strip where you check in. It was about 1 a.m. so there was no one there since the counters were closed. Then out of nowhere, Stevie Wonder shows up, said hi for like a minute, then he and his assistant disappeared. Story 17. I hitchhiked across the country multiple times between ages 15 to 22. I have climbed mountains and watched the northern lights. I've slept outside in -20 Celsius. I've taken planes, trains, buses and boats. I was so hungry one time that I stole a jack-o'-lantern off someone's porch and ate it. I stood in line for almost 2 days to see Star Wars 1, and I hated it so much I walked out halfway through the movie. I've been banned from entering the USA for at least 10 years. There's so much more, and if I had the skill I would write a book. Now at 31 years old, I have a nice little family and am actually pretty boring. Story 18. I was sitting on the curb of a busy intersection with my girlfriend at the time when a car approaching the intersection hit a rabbit. The rabbit was in mid-stride, and it flew forward instead of getting squashed. The rabbit flew a few feet and landed in my lap. Both me and the rabbit survived. Story 19. I'm adopted. In fact, my 9 siblings and I were all adopted. Each one of us had some medical issue when we were born. I was misdiagnosed as having cystic fibrosis. 2 of my sisters have spina bifida. My older brother had a hole in his heart, and my younger brother is an. Despite all this, my parents loved us and gave us a good life. Story 20. I was declared a divine gift by the monks of St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt. The monastery was built around the alleged burning bush from the Book of Exodus, and since I was really into religions at the time, I asked the monks some questions about the bush and whether they have any other interesting relics in their monastery. The monks went silent and asked me and my family to follow them down to the gates of the burning bush. They let us see the alleged remnants of the burning bush, even though we were not Orthodox Christians. This is a privilege granted only to high officials in the Orthodox Church, and they said we were the first secular people to ever see the bush. After visiting the bush, the monks gave me some kind of a special blessing where they declared me as that divine gift and a silver ring with Greek writing on it. I was a kid at the time, so I didn't really react to it in an extravagant way, but my mom was dumbfounded for days, since she is a very religious person. Now at an older age I'm just wondering if they do this every now and then as a prank, or if they actually saw something special in me. Edit for the people asking. I still have the ring in my childhood home, but I'm sorry that I can't provide pictures because I live pretty far away. I am not a religious person. My agnosticism grows stronger every year. And no, even though I have what some would call an eidetic memory, it doesn't mean that I can remember what happened on a specific date many years ago. It means that I can memorize pictures, texts and number chains for a long period of time after seeing them once. I'm still shitty in math though. Story 21. My cousin and I, both males, were about 12 years old, and as most 12-year-old boys like to do, we were climbing things. We decided to climb onto the roof of a house and everything went smooth. We got up and hung out and talked about how awesome we were for conquering this mountain of a house. Well, we go to get down and we have to drop down and hang and get our feet on a railing on the back porch. My cousin goes first and he gets down no problem exactly as planned, so I was feeling confident as ever. I scoot to the side of the house and grab the roof and drop down to hang. Well, my grip wasn't what I thought it was and I lost hold of the house and just like in the movies landed with one leg on each side of the rail. I just rolled off to my right so that I would land on the deck and could cry in the fetal position, but I didn't realize the grill was right there, so I hit my head on the grill on the way down. I had to go to the hospital because my sack was black and blue and a nice young nurse got to scan mine to make sure there was no serious damage. Luckily there were no lasting effects and I can look back on it and laugh now. TLDR Humpty Dumpty, but luckily didn't need put back together. Story 22. Long story short, I was asleep at a friend's. A kid who was there thought my friend's 45 calories handgun was a BB gun. He shot me in the left cheek, severed femoral vein, damaged femoral artery, life support for a week and a half, 3 8-hour surgeries, permanent femoral vein to femoral vein bypass fake vein, and a little over a year later I'm back on my feet on my way to being normal again. Story 23. While my parents went on vacation, my brother, 2 friends and I bought 4 cars that barely ran and had a demolition derby in the backyard. Ended up selling 3 of them for scrap and making our money back. The 4th car was stuck 30 feet up in a tree from where we jumped it off of a bluff. Story 24. Okay, here we go. I had to into a cup to count my soldiers because I had a long time testicle infection. Sorry, you have to use the children's room, every other room is occupied. So as I enter the room I see Sesame Street books, stuffed animals, colorful walls and a clock on the wall having animals as numbers. The nurse tells me that there are no magazines available and I tried to be funny and said doesn't matter, Ernie and Bert are enough for me to get off. She did not get the joke. Then she asked me if I know how to masturbate and gave me a quick rundown on how to masturbate, all the while looking disgusted and angry. Okay, so there I was, in a children's room in a urology clinic trying to masturbate into a cup while stuffed animals were looking at me with a nurse right in front of the door. I heard her telling the other nurses my fetish about Sesame Street. They all laughed. I had to start over. When I got to the point where I thought that I could fill the cup, the clock on the wall started to moo and make loud cow noises because it was 12 o'clock. I must have sighed very loudly because the whole floor went nuts and started laughing even harder. Start over NR2. When I finally finished and left the room the nurses were still laughing. Story 25. I unknowingly installed webcams, computers and internet access into a 10-room mansion for a wealthy business executive who was importing 18-year-old boys from Thailand to be his pets. It took about 2 months to complete the whole project and he would always take me out to get hot dogs for lunch. I've been hunted across the country by the FBI. They found me, no need to re-find me. I was at a rave once when a drive-by occurred and I dove behind a giant propane tank for protection. I went from making 20 KYR to 150 KYR in one phone call and 3 days later. Edit. Someone asked me to do an AMA, never done one before. Story 26. In college I had a bunked bed with my desk under it. I was in bed reaching for my cell on the desk and lost my balance. Fell off the bed, did a full flip and landed in a perfect sitting position in my chair unharmed. My roommate witnessed everything but nobody believed us. Story 27. I dragged 2 people out of the water a few years ago. I'm not the best swimmer. I just know how to use the waves to get back to shore. I had to yell at them to shut up and do exactly what I told them. They really were freaked out. As soon as we reached the beach I gave the lifeguard my biggest you look and went back home. Also that time me and my friend were outside smoking a cigarette. He threw my lighter back at me. It bounced on my knee and landed right in my hand. No one ever believes us. Story 28. I ate 5 pounds of stale Haribo in one night. Didn't for a week, then had the most intense of my life. The most intense experience of my entire life. I was thinking about calling 911 during the build up to that while crowning. I actually put 911 into my phone app and was seriously contemplating calling an ambulance. But after I got through it, I felt fantastic, like I could do cartwheels, like I was walking on air. Story 29. My brothers and sister and I lived in poverty in New England for almost all of our lives. Too many nights where dinner was only an idea. Couldn't afford to buy me boxers in the 6th grade. Mother was endlessly caring yet endlessly plagued by severe alcoholism. It crippled our family. Father was too distant. Yet one of us is a lieutenant at a fire department, 2 of us are teachers, 1 of us works for Major League Baseball, and the last one is applying to colleges to make their future better too, all being very successful. None of us resorted to drugs or drinking to resolve or mitigate our problems. I will never know how. I love my family to death. Story 30. My car was stolen twice in the same week. I got it back both times. The police didn't do anything because they kept accusing me of loaning out the keys, but I had no friends in town and both my only copies and didn't do that, so, asshats. Story 31. I posted about this before, but people eventually called bullshit. Unfortunately, it was very true, but due to the legal issues I was pursuing at the time, I wasn't elaborating further on it. A few years back I walked in on my now ex-girlfriend sucking my dogs. If there's any interest I can elaborate further. Story 32. When I was 1 year old, I climbed over my fence. My sister was watching me but got distracted and crawled across the street to a neighbor's house and sat around in the backyard for 4 hours without being noticed. Story 33. My grandmother was murdered by my grandfather when my mom was a little girl. It was never proven, but we know it. Backstory available if anyone is interested. Side note: the house she died in was also supposedly haunted. A couple of stories there too. Edit: sorry I took so long to reply guys, I have a 16-month-old, so my computer time is quite limited, haha. Okay, story time. When my mother was 11 she was at home with my nurse grandmother and abusive grandfather. My mom had a pretty tough childhood, and still wet the bed every night. She had 2 older siblings, but they were all moved out and stuff. Anyway, my grandmother was a nurse as I said before. She gave herself a vitamin shot every day. She just administered it to herself. No big deal. She had been doing this as long as my mother can remember. Well, on this particular night, there was a lot of fighting, threats, crying, physical violence, the whole 9 yards. As my mother is going to bed, her father stops her and offers her a glass of Coke. Of course she says yes, without wondering why an adult would offer a notorious bedwetter a drink at bedtime. The next morning my mother wakes up to her 22-year-old sister shaking her and screaming for her to wake up. My mom woke up but said she felt dizzy and sick. She didn't quite understand why her sister was there, and why she was screaming. Apparently the night before, about an hour after my mother went to bed, my grandmother gave herself a fatal overdose of insulin. She only kept the insulin in case of emergency for my uncle. My aunt saw the body and said she had bruises and the injection spot had multiple pricks. This was back in the 70s, and after telling the police his wife was a heavy drinker and suicidal, they dropped the case. After my grandmother's death, my grandfather literally just packed up and left, without his 11-year-old daughter. My mom ended up growing up in group homes and has some terrible stories from her youth. She actually ended up turning into an alcoholic to reclaim her youth, and that killed her 2 years ago on her 46th birthday. Nobody in my family has spoken to him since the 70s. He may have approached my mother in the 90s, she wasn't sure, but he took off after making a racial slur about her biracial children. Even if he was around, he would not be in my life. Okay then, ghost story time. The first one was right after my grandmother died in the same house. My aunt moved in after my grandfather left to try to take care of my mother. It didn't work out, but that's beside the point anyway. My mom gets home from school one day and my aunt is sitting on the driveway, pale and shaking. My mom asked what was wrong and she said she refused to go in. She said she heard something weird in their mother's room. They didn't really go in there. Grandma liked her personal space in life out of habit, except to occasionally clean. So, my mother approached the door, wondering why her sister was being an idiot. As soon as she touched the doorknob, the entire door shook like someone slammed into it. This was accompanied by an almost comical roar. My mom immediately opened the door because she didn't believe it was anything but an idiot dog, not a thing in the room, and nothing was out of place. My mom said she was more curious to its origins than scared. Same house, same time frame. My mother was in her own bedroom, doing whatever by the window. She happens to glance out her window at her mother's. Their windows faced each other over the backyard patio. She just sees the heavy velvet drapes in the room swishing back and forth really hard, like someone was swinging them. She ran to her mother's room, and the curtains weren't even fluttering. This last thing I'm not sure how factual it is. I've never actually researched it, but it's common knowledge in my family. After my mother moved out of the house into a group home, the house was sold to a newlywed couple. A few months after they moved in, the dude went nuts and chopped his wife into multiple pieces. He then dumped those pieces in the mountains and tried to pretend she never existed. My family likes to use this as proof that something evil was in the house. Holy wall of text. Sorry about the horrendous writing. I hope I got my point across okay. Story 34. When I was a kid, let's say around 9, I said to myself out loud, I really want to see an owl, and an owl landed on my fire escape and looked at me. We made eye contact and we had a connection. No one believes me because we live in NYC and it was daylight, but I swear it was an owl. I've seen birds that you wouldn't place in the city before as well, so yeah. Story 35. Cedric the entertainer told me I have a nice, but I thought he was some random creep until a few people went up to him and asked for autographs pictures. Story 36. TLDR, I accidentally abducted a baby deer, so I was enjoying a nice spring day, and decided to go for a run. After 5 to 6 miles, in getting close to my house and slow down for a cool down, as I turn down my road, I hear a noise behind me and see a baby fawn following me. As soon as I stop and turn around, the fawn looks around and starts wobbling away from me. And I mean wobbling, this thing was young enough that it was having trouble walking steady. So I turn back around and start running home again, and the fawn follows, chasing me down the road. I stop, same thing. Repeat this 3 to 4 more times before I realized I had taken off my white shirt and tucked it into the back of my shorts when I was running, and the fawn saw the bouncing flash of white and instinctively followed it, but got confused as soon as we would stop and he realized that there were no other deer around. So I turned around and led him back down the road to where I first saw him. I saw a doe standing back in the trees, so I took my shirt out and shooed the fawn back into the trees. Story 37 was walking back from Lava Lounge in Seattle back in 2001, was doing some underage drinking. There was some scaffolding and construction around the crocodile. Out of nowhere, a gang of 8 or so drunken clowns start getting loud, approach me, and then dry humped me against a wall for a minute. Was probably 1 a.m. Story 38. I'm 15 years old in summer 1999. I had a meet and greet pass to an NSYNC concert in Michigan. Got passed through fan club. I met them and gave them a letter about how much their music meant to me. I included my phone number at the end. A few days later I receive a phone call and it's JC and Justin. Call from a blocked number. I scream for my little sister to pick up another phone so she can hear. They said they got my letter and appreciated it and to stay in sync. No one ever believes this story so I never tell it. TLDR, NSYNC called me on the phone.